Thank you for joining me for another episode of Awaken Empowered TV. I'm your host, Ethan Fox. Today I'm joined by Georgina Cannon, and we speak about past lives and the life between lives and a lot of very interesting topics related to that, such as whether you carry your karma from past lives into this one, and how ancestral karma actually imprints in our DNA, and how to go about removing these blocks to have a more expansive and fulfilling life. So lots of very fascinating topics. We did just have our Weekend in Wizardry day camp for kids, and we'll be having the next one for next year. We'll be announcing that soon as well, so stay tuned for that. And also our Conscious Youth program for kids as well, which is a free online program if your kids would like to join that with other kids around the world who are exploring their spiritual gifts or who may be interested in those types of topics. So lots of great things we have going on, so stay tuned for those events. If you want to buy tickets to our expo and join us in person, you can find that at awakenempoweredexpo.com. So I look forward to seeing you there. So without any further delay, here's Georgina Cannon. Hi, Georgina. Welcome to Awaken Empowered TV. It's a pleasure to have you on the show with me. So where are you joining from today?
I'm joining from Toronto.
And well, I'd like to start by, I know you've got a very interesting past and a lot of things you've done in the mainstream world as well. Can you start by sharing a bit about your background in the corporate world and marketing and all the other things you did prior to all the interesting things we're going to discuss today?
Sure. When I talk about it, I didn't realize I've lived so long. I started as a journalist in England, working on a woman's magazine while I was... and even before that, actually, I did PR for a fashion house. And then I joined the Woman's Magazine as one of their beauty editors. And then from there, I went to another magazine called Every Woman as their fashion and beauty editor. And then I met the man that I thought was going to stay with me for the rest of my life and came to Canada, for which I'm very grateful. But I'm still here, but he's not. So it all works out beautifully. So I came to Canada, and my first job here was as a journalist again. And from there, it evolved into being a freelance writer. And while I was being a freelance writer, one of the articles I wrote was about a men's fashion designer, and he liked it so much that he asked me if I'd do his PR for him. And I said, sure. One of these people that always say yes and then worry about it afterwards. And so I did that, and suddenly I had a PR company, which grew to 12 people. And we handled clients like the Gold Information Centre, the Four Seasons Hotel, Chanel, Yves Saint Laurent, some of the big stores in Toronto, major openings in Toronto of hotels and special events. And we also put on the very first fashion show for young fashion designers, an award show sponsored by Ray-Ban. I also managed to produce at that time through the PR company a fashion magazine called Fashion Canada Mode for the Canadian government that was sent out to all of the trade missions around the world, the Canadian trade missions, so that people could begin to understand what fashion was. As that evolved and we got quite well known in the city, someone came in from a very large PR company called Burson Marsteller and wanted to know if I'd be interested in joining them. And I said to my then husband, why would I want to do that? You know, he said, well, don't say no. Go and see what they have to offer first. So I did, and what they had to offer was very exciting. It was called Burson Marsteller. It's a company. It's one of the world's largest PR companies still. And they put me on what they call their SWAT team. The SWAT team consists of specialists that they'd send around the world to work with different clients. And I was their strategic marketing person, their creative director for Canada as well. But they're on their SWAT team, and they'd send me around to talk strategy and creativity to different corporations. So they sent me to Hong Kong and to Holland and to England and to Ireland and everywhere. There's not everywhere, but quite a few places. And it was very heady and very exciting. And then they asked me to open up a competitive PR company for them. Because I was pretty good at building business at that time, and which we did, so that we could take competitive business to separate agencies, but all under the same umbrella. And I did that, and that got up and running. And then 2 years later, they asked me to go back to the mothership and become managing director for Canada, run the 4 offices across Canada. That was very exciting. It was very difficult because I was one of only, I think, 3 women internationally, senior women. And at that time, it was very difficult for women in business. We get very dismissed. And, you know, there came a time when I just couldn't look myself in the mirror anymore. And, you know, although my daughter preferred that I stay where I was because she liked having a mogul as a mother with an expense account and secretaries and stuff, I couldn't take it anymore, so I left. And I looked around for something to do, something that had meaning, something that had value. And because I'd grown up in England, we always know that there are fairies at the bottom of the garden and that ghosts exist and we are more than we seem. We just know it. It's in our DNA, if you like. So I looked around for something to do, and I got my Reiki master training. I got my color therapy training. I took some Gestalt training, and then happened upon hypnosis and got very excited because I could see that that could access not only the subconscious mind, but also the universal consciousness. And within months of taking the training, I opened a school because I've got the training accreditation, and a clinic. And that grew to be Canada's largest over 18 years. And then a few years ago, I sold it. I needed some time away. I got ill, as a matter of fact, and continued writing because I'm a journalist, so I keep writing books and blogs and, you know, that sort of thing. And continued writing. And I still see clients in the clinic 2 days a week. I write a lot, and I teach at the university. I teach hypnosis at the University of Toronto. So that's my life in a nutshell.
Well, if you don't mind me asking, have you ever delved into that relationship that didn't work out as to the past life ties? And because I think a lot of people find themselves in relationships that seem like they're going to last forever, but they don't. And
Yes.
was there some sort of past life connection or?
There were a couple, as a matter of fact. Really, thank you. That was a very insightful question. When I was training with Henry Bolduc, the wonderful Henry Bolduc, I trained with Henry Bolduc and Michael Newton. I took Michael Newton's last class, as a matter of fact. And the person that was facilitating my regression, we went back to 2 or 3 different lives, but each one I was either beaten. In fact, that's how I got rid of my migraines, because in one of them I was beaten to death on the side of the head, my skull collapsed. Or I was left behind by a man, but in some way or shape or other, I was brutalized or left. So out of the 3 past lives, I was left alone. In one, I ended up running a boarding house in the Gold Rush for all the miners, but I never went out to meet them. I had people that I stayed in the background. I ran the business, and I had people serving the food and making the beds, and I stayed away from them, which is very interesting when you think about that. And the other one, I was a very high society woman somewhere in Europe. We think it might have been Spain, but I was locked away because I wasn't allowed as a woman to go out and meet people. So I lived a very lonely, solitary life. And my husband played a lot, let's put it that way.
And was this the same man in this life, or were just different men that you?
Different men, yeah.
And so you came back in this life with this particular man to play out the same types of issues, or what? How did it correlate?
It was slightly different because he was a lovely guy, and he was my best friend, actually, and that was a mistake. You know, once it got beyond friendship, it just didn't work. And he's a very gentle soul, and I'm much more of a driver. And that's fine as a friendship, but as a partnership, a life partnership, it just didn't work.
Now, it sounds like in some of the lives, at least that you're describing, you lived kind of a similar sort of life in that in this life you were very entrepreneurial and business oriented as well. So do you find that people who have certain kinds of interests and tendencies in this incarnation are bringing with them that knowledge from other incarnations that they did similar things?
Yes, sometimes, but not always. So, for instance, when people come into the clinic and they say, "Oh, Georgina, how come I always choose losers?" And guys can say that as well as girls. So I say to them, and they say, "So I want to do a past life to see." So I said, "Well, let's not go there directly. Let's just find out if, in fact, it's a pattern you picked up in this life, either from your parents, or there's some issue around you not having boundaries, or let's find out about you living your values." So we look at this life, and before we take the journey into past life, because when we take a journey into past life, it doesn't necessarily take us where we need to go. When we take a past life, the soul takes us where it thinks we need to go, not where we think we need to go. So, for instance, if someone comes in and says, "I'm fascinated by, I don't know, Japanese or violins, and nobody in my family is at all intrigued by that," and we ask to go back to that, it might take us to totally different lives. So I've got the client in the clinic, and I don't want to waste their money or their time. So we do questioning and search and research about their current life and about their vision of their world today and how they interact with other people as well, not just dates, not just people on a journey to look for a partner. And I do say to them, do you realize it's like wine tasting? Dating is like wine tasting, right? It might be a great vintage and it might be a beautiful wine, but not right for you. So let's find out what's right for you. So that's part of the whole process as well. Because it's easy to blame karma, but let's make sure it's more than that, or different from that, or the same as that. We do bring patterns, but let's make sure that that's not one of them. That makes sense?
Yes. Now, I've read Dr. Newton's books as well, his Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls, and quite a long time ago, actually. And so he talks a lot about this in-between place that you call the interlife, yes.
Yeah.
Can you describe, so the interlife, so that's when a person passes on from a physical incarnation and moves this in-between place. What, from your research, happens there?
It is awe-inspiring. People are so deeply moved, sometimes they just weep. They leave the body. That we start off in the session, in the clinic, we start off with a brief past life, because I've asked them to do past life regression before, so they know how to recover and record journeys. So we leave the body, and I journey with them where they take me, and there's usually some sort of threshold, and the threshold can be a gateway, or it can be a circle of light, or it can just be a place that they enter into that has a different color. They just know that they feel different. And along the way, maybe they float amongst planets or stars, or maybe they're pulled or pushed. It's extraordinary. They will do the same thing but differently. So they get there, and there may be one guide or someone waiting for them, or 5 or 6 or 12. The people that meet them may take the shape of Buddha, or a beloved grandparent, or Jesus, or Mary. My interpretation of that is that their souls, the enlightened ones, take on the form that the person will recognize and not feel misguided or frightened by. So they take on a guise of being welcoming, so whatever shape that is. So they are welcomed by that group, and sometimes they're embraced, and the communication is very loving and welcoming, like welcome home. That's when the tears start to fall. And they sometimes are taken to a place called the soul circle, where they meet other souls along the way that they have traveled with along the way, because we travel in pods. Not every soul is in every lifetime with us, but some are and some aren't. And we take different roles along the way. So our father this time could be a cousin, another time, or a boss, or our son, or our daughter. So we go to the soul circle, and they welcome us, and they share information. The sort of information they share is that how far you come and where we're moving on to next. And I'm going to be with you in the next life. Hi there, haven't seen you for a while. Sometimes it's very sort of party-ish. It's very funny. Other times it's quite solemn and profound. Depends on the person. After we visit there, we can go to a place called the laboratory, where people learn to manage their energy differently, their psychic energy. They may move up a notch. They may become more connected, or they may need to tone it down. Some people are such strong empaths that it interferes with their life, and this is a place where they can simmer it down, where it can be managed better. So that's the laboratory, or we go to a place of rest and recuperation, a healing place, which is extraordinary. Beings surround you with the most profound love and acceptance that we hardly ever experience in this world. And the soul has time to heal. All the bruising, all the pain that the soul has encountered over previous lifetimes gets healed in this place. And only the soul decides whether we need to go there or not. It was quite extraordinary. We can't say we want to go there. Then we may go to the library or the Akashic Records, and our guide may travel with us or not. And that's where we go to have some of our questions answered, like what is your soul name? What is your soul color? What is your soul purpose? Have you begun it, achieved it in the past life, or is this the life that you need to do it? Where are you on the path? And sometimes it takes the shape of, for people, of a tablet coming down. Not a tablet like an Apple tablet, but a tablet of some sort, almost biblical, where they get things inscribed on it. Other times it's a huge golden book that floats down from a bookshelf. You can't make this stuff up. I mean, it just, I tingle every time. This is 21 years later and I still get goosebumps. And so they get some wisdom and some learning and some surprises. And from there we go to the wise elders, the council. There can be 3, there can be 6, or sometimes 12. Sometimes they are just beings of light with no form. Other times they look like wise elders, women and men. Other times they're androgynous, with robes, sometimes with great symbols on the robes. But always they are filled with loving kindness. And they talk to the client with such grace and such acceptance. And this is where the client comes with a series of questions that they want to ask the counsel. I don't let them ask things like, the lottery ticket numbers or anything like that. We don't get there. We ask about their life and, their life purpose and what they want to accomplish, what they have missed out on. Sometimes people, the counsel will say to them, there are people coming into your life in the next few years that are going to be a profound impact on your life, but you have to prepare for this, and this is the type of thing you need to do, prepare. And that type of thing may be forgiveness of self. It may be compassion. It may be learning a new language. That's happened a couple of times too. And by the way, all this takes 3 hours. And when they leave there, we go to the place where life selection. Now they know their life purpose. Now they know their soul name. Oh, one thing I didn't tell you was you have a soul thumbprint. That's what I call it anyway, but it's not a thumbprint. I mean, how can a soul have a thumbprint? It's what you bring with you from lifetime to lifetime. Mine was teacher. I was thrilled to find out that's what my thumbprint is, teacher. And it makes a lot of sense. So they're too, they found their soul purpose, they found their soul thumbprint, they found their soul name and their soul color. Now they get to choose the body to come in with in the current life. And they get to find out why they've chosen that body. So some people try on 3 or 4, male, female, black, white, yellow, everything. And married, old, young, frail, disabled, depending on what they have to learn. And they get to choose their body to come into this life. That is the most extraordinary part of the whole thing, because they realize they have chosen who they are. And stop whining about it because you chose it. Stop complaining. This is who you are. Celebrate it. This is the body you've chosen. Then they understand, as we go through a process, they understand why they chose their parents. What could their parents teach them? Why did they choose their mother? Why did they choose their father? What about the siblings? And why did they choose that particular time in history, in that particular place in the planet to land? Profound. It leaves no room for excuses. But people remember this, and they are deeply moved, and they realize they're in control, and they are more than they seem, which is so important.
Now, if we have full control over choosing our own bodies and those kinds of things, then why wouldn't somebody choose a body that would be considered by that time to be the most attractive or the most physically, strong, or whatever the case may be? Why would that not be the case?
Because sometimes it doesn't fit with your soul purpose. There is a school of thought, which I buy into, that children with Down syndrome are very highly evolved souls. They come in on purpose to help people learn others, learn compassion, learn caring, and learn again that we are more than we seem at first sight. So that's the reason. Yeah. A colleague of mine who is profoundly deaf, she does hypnosis for birthing. I trained her early, way back when, and she now does it for birthing. So she brings new souls into the world. And one point she asked me if I could regress her and find out why she chose to be deaf. And the reason was something like, it was more profound when it came through at that time, something like you have to learn to communicate with more than one way to do the work you're here to do. And her work was to bring new souls into the world. Isn't that lovely? Yeah, just lovely.
So I get a lot of people ask me questions like, why would some people choose to be born into the middle of war-torn areas, or into poverty or hunger or those kinds of situations? And we tend to judge other people's life experiences through our own lens of our own experience. And here in the Western countries, we tend to live a little bit more affluent, so we judge foreign, a lot of third world countries and their lifestyles as being adverse or negative compared to ours. What's your perspective on that souls have chosen such a diversity of experience?
I think two things. First of all, I think we choose to be a victim or a hero in our life. It doesn't matter where we are. Even in Afghanistan, the Sudan, the Holocaust, there were always people that rose to the occasion, that were generous of spirit, that were kind, that are leaders and others who gave up and became victims. Even in the worst circumstances. I mean, you read these wonderful stories on Facebook about young men who live in a village, a very poor village in one of the countries in Africa, and has developed a way of providing light around the cows so that the lions can't attack them by using solar. He developed it by going online and put together, found pieces of metal and put it together. That's what I mean. His soul is resilient. He's chosen to be a hero. So that may have been the lesson, that he needed to be in that space so he could choose victim or hero. Is that making sense?
Yes. So in that case, to what degree, when we're in that in-between place, that we're choosing our lives and our bodies and such, to what degree is the life that we've chosen predestined? Is, including the people we meet or marry, is everything set in motion, or do we have some choice in how we live that life?
I believe that we come into this world with karma. It's like a hand of cards. But how we play those cards is up to us. Whether we've got a good hand or a poor hand, what we do with that hand, because this is a planet of free will. At the moment, we're on a planet that has free will. We can choose. We can choose how we play that. Now, there's no question that if you come into this world and you are disabled, or you are in such poverty that in the West we can't imagine. We know we have poor people in the West, but there's poverty in other places in the world that is beyond our ken, beyond our understanding, because we have not experienced it.
I see. So let's say, are you saying that if we were to be born, let's say, in a more poverty-oriented life when we start, is it possible that we could have chosen to be poor in this life all throughout, or does every individual in every case have the opportunity to lift themselves out of that? Or is it possible, essentially, that a life lesson for that particular soul might be to be in poverty for the whole life?
The life lesson for that soul is to be in poverty and to find out what you do with it. Do you become a victim of it? Do you survive it? Do you succumb to it? Or are you resilient in some way? Because everything we do is part of the soul's involvement. So even if we're scrabbling in the earth to find roots to eat, the very fact we're finding out where to go separates us from the people who are sitting in the hut starving to death. How we choose and what we choose to do. So if the thought is, and I agree with that thought, that if we don't accomplish the soul purpose in this lifetime, we have to come back and do it again. So if you're a victim and you haven't learned how to be a hero, how to be resilient, how to lift yourself up out of the morass that you found yourself in, the way back you chose to be in, then you'll come back again in a different form, but you're going to come back because the soul has a lesson to learn for its involvement.
So to clarify, then we come into life having pre-planned a certain sort of, let's say, box of experience inside of which we're meant to experience, let's say in this case, poverty. But inside of that, our free will is essentially we can choose how to have that experience.
Totally free will. And you notice it with even inner city kids. Some rise to the top, either legally or illegally. But they do it, they're resourceful. Some become victims. Some just give up and take drugs or do, and this, it's a choice. And people will say, I've had media say to me, it's not really a choice because when you're born in the Sudan or Afghanistan or Syria, right now, Syria, all you're getting is bombing, starvation. But look at Syria. Look at the white helmets. There are families that rescue others. They're all suffering the same way, but there's some that step forward.
So, to what degree do we decide on the relationships we're going to have in life? Well, I mean, obviously, we choose our parents and our siblings, but the what about the relationship partners, marriages, best friends, that sort of thing? Are those all chosen by us beforehand, or do they ever evolve in life and maybe possibly switch to a different soul family altogether?
I believe that they show up in the life that we have chosen, but it's our choice whether to accept them or not into our life, both as friends and lovers. So again, this goes back to the book I wrote on relationships. You have to know what you stand for, what your soul cries out for. What are your values? If you live your values and you live through your values, all those people that are showing up in your life, that are planned to show up in your life, some will work for you and some won't, but you get to choose. And you may make mistakes along the way, but you'll understand what those mistakes are as long as you have a format from which to work. Otherwise, you're just freewheeling through and, happenstance, luck. Well, good luck with that. And like it or not, we are in a contract with everyone that we meet, whether it be the cashier at the supermarket or you and I. You have expectations from me and I've had expectations from you. And we know what that is. But for some people, they don't talk about that, especially in relationships, whether it be friends or even family. People put up with an enormous amount of disrespect in families because they don't revisit the contract. They don't say, Uncle George, I'm sorry, or Aunt Mary, I have boundaries. Please don't do that. Please don't say that. Please don't behave that way in front of my wife or my husband. It's inappropriate. I don't want it. So that's the importance of having your boundaries through your values. So these people show up, but whether you accept them or not, and bring them into your circle, into your web of love, that's up to you.
So, from that, just to clarify that idea, is there any conscious or any point in actively trying to date, if you're somebody who's single, for example, to try to find your soulmate or anything like that? Because if they've already been chosen for you by you before you came here, then you're going to meet them at the right time regardless, right? Or you're not if it's not the right time. Am I on the right track there?
No, that's not what I meant. I meant that you get to choose in this lifetime.
Oh, I see. You get to choose.
Most people are programmed to come into you, into your screen, if you like, into your life. We're like a tapestry. So all these people show up in different forms in your tapestry. But which piece of that tapestry you choose to engage with is up to you and up to your value system. Lifelong friendships are so valuable, and usually they're based on the same value system, the same, I need kindness in my relationships. I need fun in my relationship, whatever it is. Once you know that, then you get to choose from all these people who you want to travel this life with. And it's more likely to succeed that way. It's a conscious choice from the array that you have in front of you.
Now, I meet a lot of people. In particular, there are a lot of women who come to our events and who follow our work who are much more spiritually awakened than the men that are out there. And many of them find themselves in relationships or marriages that they've been in for a while with a partner who is not really communicating at the same frequency or consciousness that they are. And so they feel kind of stuck in these relationships and not really sure whether they should stay there and make it work or whether they should move on and find somebody who is more in resonance with who they are. What do you think is happening there? Does resonance between two people in a relationship change if one has a consciousness shift?
Oh, absolutely, it changes. I do a lot of couples counseling. So a couple come in to me and he'll say to me, she's not the woman I married. I said, well, how long have you been married? I said, well, 20 years. I hope not. If we don't grow and change in 20 years, there's a problem. And she'll say the same thing. He's now fixated on golf. At one time, he was fixated on the home. And I saw him. Well, they take snapshots of each other. We all take snapshots of each other. My sister and I were discussing this a few months ago. There are times when we treat each other like we were when we were teenagers because we take snapshots. We don't bring them up to date. So the first thing to do is to look at a relationship like that and bring it up to date and talk about 5 things. What do you absolutely need from this relationship? We are us. We are a couple. If you want to be, we are a couple. Let's form a new contract. The one we wrote 20 years ago doesn't exist anymore. This is before we had kids. This is before we had enough money to travel. It was a different world. We are different people. If we still love each other and want to be together, let's form a new contract, a new relationship. Let's look at what we both need, what we both want, what our values are, and what we're prepared to give to make it us. And let's agree on that. And let's move forward with this new picture. So we're not using an old snapshot. We're not living in the past. And that's what happens. And it happens with men and with women who go off on a tangent. Someone gets more education or becomes more prosperous and has to drag his wife along. This is what I hear a lot. Drag my wife along to these corporate functions. And then you have women who say, I try to talk to him about, the humanity, and he doesn't care. He doesn't want to talk about that. I feel very lonely. So that's because they're still seeing each other as they were, not as they are. So my job as the couple counselor is to get them to see each other, get them to see each themselves as they are different, and then make a new contract, a new circle. I call it the third circle. So it's him, her, and the relationship. So they're building that together. It's a new being, if you like, new entity. And then they can decide whether they want it or not. And even if they decided to separate at that point, they now have more understanding of what it takes to make a healthy relationship.
Now, do you find that, have you ever had in your sessions with individuals where they've regressed into an incarnation that was not on Earth, some other planet or dimension?
Oh, I hoped you were going to ask me that. Yes, I have. I have to tell you there's a couple, about 5 or 6 that are mind-blowing, but one in particular, a young man came into the clinic. He was a very progressive thinker in that he wanted to work with inner city kids and he wanted to build gyms for them so they could learn, not kickboxing, I forget what it was, Xbox or something, it was called Xbox. So they could feel empowered, both young girls and boys. And he said, but he's not getting any support and he's sick to death of going to the politicians, he's sick to death of going to social workers, nobody cares, nobody wants to support him, so he's going to do it himself. So I said, well, you might want to think about that. I said, it's a little dangerous because you're dealing with human beings and you do need some support and you need some social awareness around it, you have insurance. So he said, oh, yeah, well, that's what I'm going to do anyway. But I wanted to do a past life to see if I've ever done anything like this before because I'm so driven to it. Well, 2 things happened. He did a past life, and then we did a life between lives. Do I have time to tell you about both?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the past life, he went into, the first life he went into was as one of the gang leaders in Chicago in the 1920s. And he entered the scene. He was in a street fight with the cops on the streets with his gang, and there was dead bodies everywhere, and his gang, and he escaped. And there was a scene where he left his gang and he was on a boat. He had a boat on the river somewhere, and he was there with his wife, but he didn't care about his wife. He only cared about his boys, his gang. And then the next scene was he was in a street fight again, and they all got killed. But the police shot them all, and they all got killed. The next life, because we do 2 or 3 lives in a session, that next life, he was standing and he sort of sat up like this. He said, the king, this Japanese king, is pinning a medal on me. And I look to my right and there's all my men, and he's pinning a medal on all of us. And we are being honored. And next scene was he's in a plane and he's leading a squadron, and they are bombing. This is World War II. They are bombing ships in the ocean, but they are coming down on the ships. They are kamikaze pilots. I don't know if you know what that is, but he certainly didn't know. He was like in his late 20s. He had no idea what a kamikaze pilot was. So he was leading his squadron, telling them to go down, number 2, number 3, number 4, and then he finally went down himself and killed himself doing that. He was weeping. He came out and he said, what I've done to my group, what I've done. So I said, yes, but you got a medal, because he didn't know it was the emperor. He didn't know that there was no such thing as a king of Japan. He thought, because he called him a king. And so he went away and thought about what he was going to do and how he was going to manage it. He realized he couldn't do it on his own. He needed support. That was such a strong message. He came back a few months later for a life between lives. And this blew me away because he, once he left the body, I can't remember what it was, it was a very brief life, he suddenly said, oh, that's strange. I'm in liquid. So I said, what type of liquid? He said, well, it's like water. And I thought, oh, he's a dolphin. I don't know. Well, what form are you? I'm humanoid, but I've emerged from water, and the others also emerging from water. So I thought, what is happening? So I said, what's the purpose of you all emerging from water? He said, well, we come together when we have to make a new energy. We come together as a team when we're needed. So I said, do you need anything to eat? You said, no, we need nothing. We just emerge from the liquid. We become form so that we can create something new. When it's created, we then go back and merge once more with the water. I mean, I was just blown away. Absolutely blown away. Isn't that extraordinary? Then he went from there, and we morphed into another scene, which looked like, he said, it's the most beautiful garden. And this is not a guy that would talk like this, I want you to know. He's a very macho guy. Xbox, whatever that is. Not Xbox, but something. A most beautiful garden with flowers of colors I've never seen before and animals that I've never seen before. But it's the most peaceful place. And there are people on the ground, and there are beings moving amongst us, like very tall, white, with angel wings. And he suddenly said, oh my God. I said, what's happening? This is my squadron. They're being healed. Well, I was nearly in tears. Again, can't make that up. It's beautiful. The soul is magnificent. We are magnificent creatures, Yeah. When people ask me what I do, I say I help people find their magnificence. That's my job. So whether it be in this life or past lives or interlife, that's where they find it.
So the last story you were sharing was the Interlife, right?
Yes.
Now, have you ever regressed anybody back to ancient times, like the times of the pyramids or the Sumerians or anything like that?
Yeah, there are people who've gone back to cave times. There was one client who went back to being a molecule. Another client went back to being, what was he? Energy. And he was interesting. He was a rock musician, and he went back to being energy. And he did that. And so I did what I could. I can't ask him what he's wearing on his feet or what his clothes are, or I'm asking what his purpose is, what he accomplishes. And what happened to him when he came out, he said, well, that's extraordinary. It's sort of weird, Is this normal? People always say, is this normal? Because everything's normal. But he phoned me a few weeks later because every time he went on stage and tried to plug in his amp to play his guitar, he'd get a shock. And he also, the following day, I remember he told me he'd take his young daughter shopping at Loblaws, which is a chain of supermarkets here, and he went to put his hand on the cart, and he got a shock. So he had literally become it. I have another client who, my naturopathic doctor, as a matter of fact, we were resting back. He had one life. This was the middle life. And I said to him, so what's happening? Where are you? What do you wear on your feet? And he said, I don't have any feet. So I said, well, what do you see around you? What's going on? He said, I'm very hungry and I'm looking at a bird and I'm moving toward that bird. He wasn't laughing, but I'm laughing. I'm very hungry. And it turned out he was a snake. He'd become a snake. And the reason he'd become a snake, because I always ask, what's the wisdom from that life? That's the most important part of the past life, is what's the wisdom? He said, I have to learn to shed my skin so I can recreate myself.
Now, do you find that human beings do incarnate as animals and insects and such? If I'm remembering correctly, and it could be incorrect, I thought Dr. Newton talked about how animals are created by human souls as just part of their own learning journey. Am I?
That's right. It is a learning journey, but it is a learning journey. So like the snake, he had to learn to shed what he already knew to become something else, right? Absolutely. That's what shamans do. It's not, this is not just one way of doing it. Shamanic journeys are also, we take on the shape or do shape shifting into another animal. In fact, one of the protocols that I do with my students as they get towards the end of their class training is I take them on the imaginary journey into a jungle and imagine there's a storm coming in and you suddenly realize you're an animal or you're a creature. No, I don't say you're an animal. You're a creature of the jungle. And this rain is coming down, thunder, lightning's flashing through the trees, heavy drops of rain. As that creature, what do you do in the storm? Where do you go? What happens to you? And when they come out and report back, some have become eagles and fly above the storm. Others are big cats that sort of sit in a cave and watch everything and wait for the storm to finish so the little creatures can come out and they can go and get fed. There's a rabbit gone. So that they will take on the persona of that animal, and they find that their eyesight becomes keener, their senses become keener. It's quite interesting.
Now, is there any significance to the animals we choose as our pets? Are they guides, or are they just? And animal souls are obviously different from human souls, right? Do they ever come into our lives as some other human soul that's accompanying us as a soulmate in this?
There's a school of thought. I think it was Georgina Cannon that said that it's a level of soul that's below ours, and as they rise up, they become primary souls and secondary souls. I know that when I've had a favorite animal that we've been very close to, when they die, they never go. In fact, I had some students here the other week running a very small class, and someone said, do you have a black and white cat? And I said, not for 3 years. Well, I could have sworn I saw. That was Charlie, my black and white cat. They do come back. And people say that when they go into the light, when they have a near-death experience, sometimes they see their dog waiting for them. Yeah. So I believe that. I believe we're all souls that travel together. And the type of animal, I don't know. I think it depends on life circumstances.
Now, there are some people in various spiritual circles that have a belief that you can probably speak to or see if it's correct or not from your research, that the whole cycle of reincarnation and birth and death and karma, something that was sort of imposed on us as souls by some lower vibrational consciousness that's intending to sort of keep us locked in this.
You sure they're not talking about organized religion?
Well, that's definitely one of the arms of that from that
Perspective, yeah.
theory. Yeah. So, what do you think about that?
I think we can overthink everything. I think if it brings joy and comfort and awareness and richness to life, it doesn't matter. I'm not being cavalier about it. I really mean that. Someone, talk about religion and how wrong these people are and how rigid these people are. And I say, well, they're not harming anybody. They're living it, their true self. They're living it to the fullest, and they feel peaceful and they feel joyful. Leave them alone. It's their life. As long as you're not hurting anybody, as long as you're not harming anybody, and as long as it enriches you in this lifetime, it can't be wrong.
Well, let's take that comment a little further. What if somebody is harming somebody? So whether it be a religious leader or just some other individual, let's say they do harm somebody, was that harm out of the control of the person who was harmed, or did that person who was harmed or killed in that situation, did they choose that experience at that time? Essentially, my question is it possible for anyone to do anything to us that we didn't already choose to have done for our own journey?
I think, again, I think we have free will, so, to a certain extent. If you can't walk when you're born, you're not going to be able to move out of the way very quickly of something that's going to run you over. I think how you handle it is totally up to you. I keep going back to that. You find that people, for instance, people who have an illness, people who had cancer, for instance, they will say, oh, I'm a cancer survivor. Or they will say, oh, I had cancer and I'm fine. It's a question of how you choose to have your life. Do you give away your power or do you retain it? Do you have asthma or are you an asthmatic?
So, well, let me rephrase the question. Let's suppose that as a child, somebody was abused by a parent or an adult or something. You might say essentially it's out of their control because
yes,
stuck in the situation, right?
Yes.
So did that child choose to have that experience as a child before they incarnated, or was that imposed on them against their will?
I think that they chose to be tested because they obviously had been a victim before and they got to learn to be a hero. They chose to be tested. They chose that family. What happened within that family is the family's job, if you like. How they manage that afterwards is up to them. I get a lot of well, we know this. There are, 1 in 5 girls are sexually abused and 1 in, I think, 8 boys. It's enormous. So, but what people do with that? Do they live in shame? Do they deal with it? Do they move out of victim into hero? A very difficult life. I'm not diminishing it at all. Do they go for help when they're old enough to know better? And we're seeing that happen more and more these days. So people are taking their power back and becoming a hero.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's all.
If somebody goes to, and there are obviously different skill levels of past life regression hypnotherapists. I'm sure I've had quite a few on my show over the years. What is it when somebody goes into a past life and they find that they are some prominent figure in history, whether it be a religious leader or a political leader or a king or queen or whatever the case? Is that I've heard many people say that they're the same figure in past lives. And now, is it possible for souls to share a human incarnation, or are some of these just incorrect?
I want to be careful here because I don't want to insult anybody. I believe that it's a form of modeling. In other words, when you admire someone and you admire their traits or you admire their abilities, it might sink into your subconscious level without realizing it. And that manifests in a way that produces a past life that is like that. I had a client who came in and insisted she was Cleopatra. And okay, let's find out. So we facilitated her into hypnosis, and she suddenly said, I'm in a barge with my maidens. So I said, well, where are you going? And she said, I'm going to see Mark Antony, of course. So, and I could tell she was not in hypnosis and she was making it up. So I asked her a few questions about, are you married to him? Well, not yet, but we're going to get married. And I happen to be a history buff, so there's not much that gets past me in that way. So then I said, so have you ever been married before? Oh, no. He's my one and only love. And I thought, well, this is nonsense. First of all, we know that Cleopatra was married to her brother. We know that she had Caesar before Mark Antony came along. She was a busy lady. She was running a country. She kept herself very busy with different people. So I let her go through that and die at the end by being bitten by a snake. All very dramatic. And then I took her into her next life. And by the way, when she first came in, she said she had a fear of fire. So I said, well, maybe we'll ask and see if it's appropriate. In the second life, she was a woman in a wagon train going across the West. And I think there were 5 or 6 wagons, and she was sitting in one of them with a baby. Her husband was driving the horses, and there was another one with food behind it. I'm trying to remember exactly. But they were raided by a band coming down from the mountains, and they were surrounded and raided, and the wagons were set fire to, and she died in the fire. And while she was going through that life, her behavior and her languaging was very different. So you could see that was more real. And by the way, we did all the healing around that, and she lost her fear of fire. So, but yeah. I've only, in all 20 some odd years, 21 years, I've only had one person that was famous, and that was a person who didn't even know that this person was famous. It was a ballet dancer by the name of Pavlova. And when she came in, I said, where are you? She said, on stage, of course. I said, what is your name? Anna Pavlova. And she knew her impresario in North America. She knew her impresario in Russia, in Europe. She knew her address in New York. She knew it all. And she came out, she said, who was that? So she went to the library, her and her husband went to the library, researched, and realized she was a very famous ballet dancer. And eventually they went on holiday. They went to Paris, and they went to her tomb, I guess, because she's buried in Paris. Isn't that amazing? Now that was real.
Now, does she have an interest in this life in belly dancing?
No. She's an artist, but she performs women's groups, and no, not at all. Painter, no, not at all.
So have you had any sessions with individuals that really changed your perspective of ancient history or ancient civilizations, or even world events that might have, that we may think of one way, but are actually different from what you've heard?
I had, it wasn't radical, but it gave me another perspective. I had a woman who came to me because she felt that the pain she had in her hip was to do with a past life. And because she been everywhere. She had x-rays and MRIs, and they could find no pain, and all she could think of was it was something psychosomatic. Her doctor said it's psychosomatic, so she came in and said it's psychosomatic, but I think it's past lives. So I said, well, it's all the same stuff, you know. So we took her back, and this is a woman, probably blonde, blue-eyed, slightly overweight, in her middle 50s, very white Anglo-Saxon Protestant type of woman, from a culture that is, you know, is comfortable, let's put it that way. And she went back to being, in her words, an Israelite, living in a cave on the edges of Jerusalem. Now, there's no way this woman would have even known anything about that. And she was living there with her wife and 2 children, a son who was about, can't remember now, probably 8 or 9. And they went around their business. They went to the market and they did what they had to do. But when they heard that the Romans were marching through, they would all go hide and go up into their caves. And they were living ordinary lives. The only time they got a bit nervous, and they weren't really frightened of the Romans, it's just that they were disturbance and they interrupted, and they could turn vicious if they'd been drinking or something. So they kept a low head and they went home. So when they heard the Romans were marching through their town, their village just outside Jerusalem, so they all went back up to the cave, and the little boy was looking at the soldiers and wanted to go and march with them because, you know, little boys like soldiers. And the father pulled him back, but he escaped from his father, and he ran down, and he was marching alongside the soldiers because they were doing this. And one of the soldiers bent down and said something to the kid, and he looked up and he pointed up to the cave where they were. So a group of soldiers broke off from the march and went up the side of the hill or mountain into the cave. They raped the woman. They killed the daughter. They cut the legs, or was it 1 leg or 2, I can't remember, of the man, which is my client, woman, and let her bleed to death. And they took the boy to join the army. That was her pain, by the way, but once we processed that. That gave me another view of life that I had no perception of. You know, we hear of invading armies. We hear of the Vikings. We hear of the Romans. It's all part of our history, but we don't live it. We don't breathe it, taste it. And that took me right there. And yeah, I have a different point of view now about that time, about all times of that in those days. So that's why when I read the history of Iran, which was Persia, Morocco, way back then, you get a different feeling for it. It's not just words in a book. Yeah, it's changed my feelings about it.
Now, are all souls at different levels of evolution, meaning have some had one lifetime and others have had millions of lifetimes? Have you encountered that difference in your sessions?
I haven't encountered the difference in how many lives they've had. I've encountered the difference in the learning they've accomplished, whether they've accomplished their soul purpose or not, and what supposed level, what we call level, on their involvement they are, how closer to the light they've become. And some, it's so easy and so automatic for them to tap in and connect, and others, there's judgment still. So you know they're still not quite getting there. They judge themselves, they judge the results, they judge what they did in a past life. You know, there's no acceptance. And I don't mean just saying, oh, that wasn't very good. I mean saying, what a stupid idiot he was, he could have done it. You know, that sort of judgment. What I have found is the higher, I just realized, the higher level of the soul, the kinder and more full of grace they become. It's a gentleness, not weakness, but gentle strength as human beings.
And And so what is the purpose of this continual reincarnation? You said to get closer to the light. So at a certain point, so is that what enlightenment is, when a soul reaches this quote unquote enlightenment? And
To the creator, yeah, we do. Where Splinter, I was at an art show once in Jerusalem, funnily enough, and the artist moved me deeply with some of his work, and I asked him what he got his inspiration from. He said, "You know, we're all splinters of light of God. You know that." And I said, "I've never heard it expressed that way." He said, "Well, you should read the Talmud." He said, "Are you Jewish?" He said, "Because you should read the Talmud." I said, "I'll never read the Talmud." He said, "Well, just know that we are all splinters of the light. We're all splinters from God." So I don't say God because I don't want to offend anybody, or including myself. I say the Creator. But we're all part of the One, the isness of the One. And I think as we move closer, we become enlightened. One of my one of my favorite stories is many years ago, I had a young man come in to me who just returned from India. He'd been to an ashram for 3 months. And he came and said, "Georgina, I come to see you. I found you on the web. I came to see you because I want to be enlightened. I mean, I wasted my time 3 months in India. Come on, what do I have to do to be enlightened?" And I just laughed. I mean, now, I want it now, sort of thing. It's very funny. So I tried to explain, and he said, "Oh, well, it's going to take too much time." I said, "No, it's not going to take time. It's going to take insight, awareness, and willingness to grow. I want it now, enlightenment now."
so what happens at the point that a soul reaches enlightenment? Do they no longer incarnate into that cycle?
My belief system is that we become an avatar and we become helper. We become part of maybe somebody's counsel. We're there to teach and help and enlighten and guide and love and accept. Yeah, but at a level up here. We don't need the body anymore. Now, what that has to do with interplanets and other planets, they're moving at a different level of consciousness, some higher, some lower. But I can only speak right now for this planet.
And so at that point, the soul, no, do you find that any soul in the sessions you've done lives parallel lives, or is that only with more evolved souls? Or
more evolved souls, more because most people have a hard time living one life, so parallel lives takes a little bit of juggling. Having said what I said about interplanetary, I just want to add that I do get people who come from other planets as souls in past lives. They go to another planet. So that doesn't happen often, but it does happen. As do they speak another language sometimes in the clinic when they go to another lifetime. Yeah, we just move from one room to another, basically. I mean, that's what it is. Yeah.
I come across a lot of people these days who don't really feel very comfortable in their skin in this planet, and they feel like they're not of this place. So in that, so would you say in that situation, they're probably not, or maybe their first incarnation on Earth, or what is usually the case there?
Well, one thing I love about you is that you ask the most intriguing questions, different questions. People are often not comfortable in their skin because they haven't found out who they are and what they're here, what their sole purpose is. They're always looking outside of themselves instead of inside of themselves. Always. Well, mostly. Always. They're too busy running to stand still. And if they're not comfortable in their skin, they find everybody else wrong. They find everything else wrong. And this is why relationships founder, because it founders with themselves first and then with each other, or generally in work, play, by themselves. To be comfortable in your skin, you have to know what you stand for, what's important to you, what your purpose is, once you know what you stand for, then you're comfortable in your skin. Nobody can hurt you because you already know. I believe we're all everything, all right? I believe we're like an egg. We're everything. We're good, we're bad, we're stupid, we're smart, we're kind, we're unkind. I think we're everything. It's the piece we choose to use in each lifetime, each moment of each day of each lifetime, that make us who we are. That's my belief system. Look, even Hitler loved his dog and his mistress. You know, everybody is everything. We get to choose. I keep coming back to choice. We get to choose who we want to be every moment of every day, of every month, of every year, of every life.
Now, quite a few years ago, I knew somebody who could see spirits of people who had passed on, or even animals, and often she'd see them lingering long after they'd been gone. So what is actually, does that actually occur, and what's actually happening when a soul passes on? Do they visit their own funerals? Do they actually move on very quickly to their next incarnation? Or from my understanding, if they have a traumatic death or sudden death, they sometimes still stay in this dimension, partly.
Sometimes they just don't know they're dead. You know, they've had a very sudden accident, like they don't even know they're dead, and they wonder why they can't communicate with anybody. So they quite often go back to their family or people that they work with or somebody they have a strong connection with. And they become confused and they become sad. If they have been an addict or someone who had a very strong pattern in their lifetime, that person can feel that addiction. People might suddenly want to start drinking or suddenly start to smoke or suddenly get depressed out of nowhere. And I call that an attachment, an energy attachment, and we can release those through negotiation and send them into the light, send them home. Others don't want to leave because maybe they have children here. Or in one case, I had a mother who was so attached to her son and resented her son's wife that she didn't want to leave him to her. And that was the discussion we had. So it was quite, it's funny now, but it was quite, amazing. So, because we always think of the souls as being in light, but no, not yet. You've got to go into the light to get there.
And what sort of the symptoms does the person who is being attached onto experience from, like that situation with the mother who's attached?
Unease, suddenly unease, a feeling they're always sometimes being watched. But most of the time it's fatigue because that person's draining energy from them. I suddenly have terrible fatigue. I've been to the doctor. I don't have Epstein-Barr. I don't have multiple sclerosis. I just am fatigued. And because I can see auras, I can see them, but I don't say anything. I never say anything until someone asks me. Like, I'm sure you understand this. It's invasion. You just don't do that. It's inappropriate, unethical. So, but then they say after sudden. So I say, you know what? Why don't we see if it just might be the energy of, I don't know, feeling fatigue. Let's call it fatigue. And sometimes, we have energy, and I get them to do this test with the hands to feel their energy. And I say, sometimes that can get, one energy is another energy. It's all attached, like light and color. It's all the same sort of stuff. I make it very, very light, not woo-woo at all. So why don't we do a scan? Why don't you just close your eyes and just imagine yourself and look at yourself, around yourself, and see if you can see any sort of cloud or shadows that we could call fatigue. And I say, and they usually say, there's something. It's weird. There's something. It's okay. Let me talk to that something. And we just negotiate it away. That's how I do it. And I'm very practical. The journalist in me, if it doesn't work, I don't do it. But also no woo-woo language, no woo thing. I get very incensed by people. I was training a class once, and someone came up to me and said, "Do you mind? I hope you don't mind me telling you, but I can see an older woman standing behind your left shoulder." I said, "Actually, I do mind. Please don't do that. Don't do it to me and don't do it to anybody else." And I explained to her how invasive it was and unkind. Because if that person hadn't believed in it, they'd be shaken, you know. It's an ego thing, I think. I don't know. That's a judgment.
So to what degree are a person's health problems related to things like attachments or previous incarnation issues, like the woman who was burned, that can be repaired through, say, hypnosis or the work that you do, or and other issues that may be part of life lessons that you can't necessarily undo?
Well, I got rid of my migraines through a past life, and that woman got rid of her hip pain through a past life. But not everything. And, you know, not everything works for everybody. Not aspirin. Not even aspirin works for everybody. So, and I don't make any promises. I don't make any, I'll say, let's try, let's see where it goes. We don't know. And if someone comes in and says, you know, I don't know, I've got this eczema and, doctors can't do anything with it. I don't know, it's not an allergy. It just keeps coming up and I've only had it for the last while. I say, well, let's find out. And I put the person in hypnosis and I ask that part of them that is the eczema, who they are and what they're doing there. And we get answers. And quite often they say, bye-bye, we don't need you anymore.
So getting back to our earlier conversation about relationships and such, in various spiritual conversations, there's a separation between what people consider soulmates and twin flames. Do you find that there is a difference in those two terminologies?
Well, I personally believe that we have many soulmates. I believe that anybody that teaches us anything is a soulmate. It helps us evolve. So it could be an irascible neighbor. It could be a partner that we've divorced that's being rancorous, that's being horrible. It could be a partner or someone we love dearly that helps us flourish and grow. It can be a teacher that we had when we were a kid. If we're learning something, that's my belief system, is that that's a soulmate. I think that people go out looking for their soulmate, wanting perfection, not realizing it's got to come from here. It's got to be, you've got to know who you are before the other person, can be attracted to you around the same energetic level, but also know who you are. Because if you don't know who you are, how are they going to know? So we have to start there. Twin flames, I divided by that. I'm not so sure there is such a thing as a twin flame. I've had arguments with this with Diane Cannon, I should tell you, Dolores Cannon. I don't know. I think it's part of the primal. When someone comes into the clinic and you say, you know, Georgina, I was at a party last night and I met this person and we connected like this. I know they're my soulmate. We feel like we've known each other forever. Part of me is going, uh-oh. Because what happens is when the soul comes into this world, you come in expecting to be loved and nurtured. Baby comes in expecting to be loved and nurtured, unconditionally. What they get, if it's abuse, neglect, whatever, emotional distance, gets stamped into them as love, right? It goes in. So as they get older, they go looking for, like a heat-seeking muscle, that which they recognize at a deep level as love. The limbic brain, primal. That's what I think it is. I could be wrong. I'm just saying it's my opinion. That's the connection, I think.
So you're saying that what people look for as a soulmate is what they were conditioned to think love was as a child?
Not consciously, subconsciously. That's why you find that people go from relationship to relationship and it's the same relationship. They don't realize it. People who marry alcoholics go from one to another, or a drug addict go from one to another, or an abuser, emotional abuser, physical abuser, one to another. They don't realize it until they're in it. And they say, how come I made the same mistake again? They're drawn to it, like heat-seeking missile. They just find their way through a crowd of 1,000 people. That one, it feels familiar, and I love that. I feel it. I've come home. That's what they say. I feel like I've come home. I feel like we're meant to be together.
So what of all these courses and whatnot about how to find your soulmate? Is that a futile thing to do then? If
I would say it helps. If it helps people, if it helps anyone, great. I just hope that somewhere in them, it helps people understand themselves better and what they need. I mean, by what they need, I don't mean he's tall or she's tall, good looking, great boobs, has a good laugh, likes to dance. I don't mean that. I mean values. I mean life point of view. What's important to you?
Is it possible for a soul to come into an incarnation, let's say to have a certain kind of experience inside of a certain framework, but then to have some very significant growth experience or evolution in their consciousness to where they may move a lot faster than they might have anticipated, and as a result, switch boxes or switch to an entirely different human experience than they planned?
Sure, absolutely. We hear it all the time. We hear it about people who've been in a car accident or have had a heart attack or had a life-changing, went bankrupt and had to start again, or had a tragedy in the family, and they emerged totally differently. The soul has come to terms with it and has grown in grace. Now, having said that, my personal belief is that sometimes when there's an accident or people die suddenly and come back and differently, it's a walk-in. It's not necessarily the same soul that's changed. It's a different soul that they have an agreement to do a switch because the first soul has done what it came to do or can't go any further. But this soul has been hanging around waiting for a body to do what needs to be done. So they, it's like apartment switching. They just move in and take over the apartment.
Now, in the case of walk-ins, does the soul that walked in always know that it walked in? Or does it feel like it's just continuing its life?
I think a part of them knows. If they don't know, the people around them will tell them, boy, you're different. Oh, Charlie, you were, God, what's happened to you? You're not drinking with us anymore. You're not, what's happened to you? You're different. People will tell them they're different. Even if they don't know, part of them knows. Part of them, but a lot of people who don't understand about walk-ins or don't have the awareness of souls in their life have nowhere to put it, no box to put it in. So they just know they're different and won't question it. I think we can't assume that everybody's at the same level of awareness and knowledge about this particular issue and style of living as we are.
Does the physical body in any way retain, so the soul is unique and it comes into incarnation and chooses the physical body to express that incarnation or to experience it. But does that physical body in any way retain the vibration or the essence of that soul after the soul leaves? So, for example, if it's buried in the ground and people go to visit it, does it still contain some of that essence, or is it all moved on once the soul leaves?
Well, I think it's like any energy. Energy is contained in anything, in everything. So there's always some left. There's some left. Our skin has energy in it, right? I also do DNA regression because I believe that the DNA also passes on memories. And so that's an energy as well. We're so multi-leveled and so multifaceted that just to take one line is very simplistic, I think. And that's why it's a pleasure talking to you, because you're like this. You're great. All the years you've had doing this and talking to people. Most people I talk to just want to know about one thing, very narrow. The energy imbues everything. So, for instance, when I wrote, this is not a plug, I'm just talking about it. When I wrote the book on past lives, Return Again, I sent it off to the publisher, approved the cover with the image of blessing. And I told the publisher I had blessed the book. for the first few months, everybody that bought it said they felt something special when they held the book. Now, am I magic? No, I think it's just energy that was sent out. I truly believe that we don't even know the questions to ask. It's so profound. The amount of impact we can have by how we think, how we behave, how we talk. Every word, once we say it, is out there as energy, and it floats. It's there. It never disappears. So back to the thought of we are all everything. The importance of choosing every minute which part of us we're going to use for the betterment of humankind is something I would teach kids at school. I think if we taught that, I don't care which religion, I don't care which race, I don't care. I think we just taught that we're all the same, we're all good, we're all bad, we're all everything. Choose your best self every minute of every day, even when you're pissed off, even when you're angry. Recognize you're angry. Say, I'm angry, now let me find a good way of doing something about this. And choose. That's my theory.
Now, going back to what you mentioned about DNA, so are you essentially saying that you're seeing a relationship between, let's say, if somebody has a particular issue, whether it be psychological or physical in this life, that it could be related to their great-grandparents and an experience that they had that was carried vibrationally through their genetics to this incarnation?
Yes. Well, we know that because they've done research on Holocaust survivors, for instance. We also know that with the post-traumatic stress disorder, children and people who've had post-traumatic stress disorder, children of Korean vets. When I have someone come in who has anger issues, after we've done everything else, every other protocol, and it's still hanging in there, and I say to them, anybody else in your family had anger issues? And they'll say, not really. I mean, it's not just anger, it's rage. I just burst. I said, would you mind if we did a DNA regression and find out who? And they go back to maybe a great-grandfather. Someone I know is doing research on bulimia and anorexia. And they have found that going back through the DNA, going back through families, in men it shows up as alcoholism, and in women it shows up as bulimia and anorexia. And even if there's a couple of generations in between, you don't know about it. It's still back there in the DNA.
So if you're going to have children, it's probably wise to work through as much as you can before you do that. You're passing that on?
For every reason, yes. Financially, emotionally, psychologically, every reason, for sure. Yeah. You need to know. I mean, I think it's very, I don't know the word. People who are more primitive than us, if we can say that, because we're going back to primitive times, believe very strongly in ancestor, inheriting your ancestors. And sometimes when I work with women's groups, and sometimes when I work in the clinic, I ask the client to call on the wisdom of their ancestors. It's there. And if you're quiet, and I do this myself actually, if I'm struggling with something and I'm just quiet and I ask for help from my ancestors. Now, does this mean that part of my subconscious mind is delving in and giving me a solution? It's a metaphor. It doesn't matter. It works.
So why is there such an increase in things like autism and so on these days? Is there some sort of collective consciousness issue that occurred in previous generations that carried forward to that, or is it some other phenomenon?
I don't know if there's an increase in it. I think we're just more aware of it. I remember growing up when I was very young in a small village in England, and we had people who we said were foolish. Foolish young men or foolish people who were, today we'd call them low IQ or whatever. We just have named it differently. We now recognize it and give it a name, and the medical profession has given it a name, which is fine, good, and treatment. But I don't think it's more. We don't know if it's more. We have no way of knowing if it's more.
Is there anything have you worked with autistic individuals, and have you found that there's any similar characteristic?
I've worked with people on the autism spectrum, but Asperger's mostly. I can't work with them with hypnosis, of course, because they can't focus in the way that I need them to focus. But on the Asperger's syndrome, I can help them use what they have to their benefit instead of a negative. So, because they need order, so let's find a way of using that order so you can use that at university or school and learn in your order, not in their order, not in your teacher's order, but in your order. So get the material and put it in your order. So we do it that way. I can't use hypnosis that way, but I can use counseling coaching. I do work with people with OCD with hypnosis, but not with autism, no.
Now, in your work that you said you're doing with DNA, are you finding that, because I'm, in the work that I do, I'm involved with a lot of very talented people who are starting to manifest very unusual abilities such as telekinesis and telepathy and things of that nature. So it seems like there's some kind of an evolution happening in human beings on a larger scale than in the past, or at least we're just more aware of it now, maybe. But are you noticing anything like that and changes in DNA with human beings now compared to in the past?
Well, I think there's a universal consciousness, right? So we are more aware of what's happening out there. So the more you're aware of something, the more you see it, because we see what we look for. So it's always been there. There's always been people who could do these things, and they called them magicians or traveling wizards or whatever they did. It's now that we're aware of it and people want to join the club, as it were, and become spiritual or become whatever you want to call it. And I think that it's also the vibration of the planet is I think, rising. I think we're getting, the vibrations change, it's getting higher. I just think the more we know, but I'm a great believer in the universal consciousness. It's all up there. We can reach up and pull it down if you're aware enough to do so. One of the gentlemen that I see from time to time, he's a chief financial officer at a bank. And I'd seen him for quite a while for other issues. And he came, surprisingly, to see me for a past life. And we did the past life. It was pretty unremarkable. He was a farmer or whatever, but he felt it very interesting. He said it was interesting. He came back to see me a couple of weeks later and said, Georgina, something really strange is happening. He said, is this normal? Is it normal? I said, well, it's normal for you. What is it? Well, now when I look at trees, and I can see trees from my window in my office, when I look at trees, I can see or sense the roots of the tree. And I can see sort of the whole joining of the tree, the root and the trunk and the leaves and the branches. Is that weird? Is that normal? It's awareness. He's opening up to possibility. And I said, it's extraordinary, and you're going to see that in people too. You will see the connection in people and how they really are, what their true self is. You're opening up to that. I said, celebrate it. He said, oh, okay. I was just wondering if I was losing my mind. No, you're not losing your mind. It's just getting larger.
Have you ever had encounters with, or clients who have had encounters with multidimensional beings or extraterrestrial contact or anything like that?
Yes, I do. I have them. I don't work with them anymore. I refer them out to a colleague. But I don't know if you know, but I was invited to Gaia a while ago, and they asked me to regress a couple of whistleblowers who were in fact part of that interplanetary travel. So that was interesting. I can't talk about it because it's, you know.
Okay. So, well, where do you see things going as far as, I mean, it sounds like you have quite a wide range of clients these days. Are you finding that business or that the interest in using hypnosis for this purpose is increasing over time?
Yeah, I still get people who come in for hair pulling and wanting to stop their pulling their hair or want to stop biting their nails. But I'm getting, and particularly men, I'm getting more and more people who want to come in and say, "I'm stuck. I need you to help me get out of being stuck." And I say to them, "What does stuck mean to you?" Because I know what it means to me. What does it mean to you? Well, I can't seem to get beyond myself. I can't seem. So they're going inside. They're becoming more aware of their soul motivation rather than financial motivation or social motivation. And they want to become more whole. And to me, that's glorious. You know, I mean, how great is that?
So what are some of the more interesting new things that you're doing with your work? The DNA work you touched on a little bit. Can you tell me more about that or anything else that's new?
What am I doing? I'm teaching at the university, which I love. I should tell you this, is sort of funny because, the University of Toronto is a very prestigious university. And I got in there 9 years ago because the Dean of Social Work came to one of my courses for hypnosis. And in one of the classes, I explained how with hypnosis, you can release fears and phobias in 40 to 45 minutes. And he put his hand up and said, "Excuse me, I'm a psychologist, social worker. There's no way. It doesn't work that way. It takes at least 2 or 3 months because you have to do desensitization." And he went on to explain. And I said, I agree with you. It is desensitization, but in hypnosis, I can do it in 34 minutes. So he said, $20. So he took out $20 and put it on the desk. So we took the bet and he lost his $20. And that way he got me into the university because he believed in it. And I taught self-hypnosis on a weekend. That self-hypnosis course over the years has expanded. It's now 3 semesters. And the last semester is all about spiritual hypnosis. If anyone had told me that the university would be teaching spiritual hypnosis, even 5 years ago, I've never believed them. So there is an awareness, there's a welcoming, and the class is full of everybody. We have doctors and psychologists and social workers and people who just want to learn. Yeah, so the first semester is all about hypnosis itself. Second semester is all about different tools to use when you're in hypnosis. And the third semester is about spiritual hypnosis. How's that for a gift?
So how does self-hypnosis vary from what you do with clients?
Well, it's part of what I teach my clients. Anytime you come, I believe, anytime you come to therapy, it's a co-creation. I can only do so much. You have to do the rest. I'm not doing it to you. We're doing it together. We're co-creating your change, whatever that change is. So I will teach you self-hypnosis. I will teach you how to write your script for change, to go into the subconscious mind, so that you can exercise, eat better, whatever it is, you feel more confident, public speaking, whatever it is you want to change. So I teach you to do that, and you do it at home for yourself. And then when you come in the following week, I say, "Did you do your self-hypnosis?" It's either, "Oh, I didn't have time," or it's, "Yes, and I can't believe it's actually working." I love that. I can't believe it's working. Yeah.
Well, can somebody really overcome something if they don't want to? I mean, let's say somebody really likes to eat food and they want to lose weight. Can that be overcome in hypnosis?
You can't force anybody to do anything. If when people come in and they want to quit smoking, I always say on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you want to quit? How much really want to quit? And if they say 7, I say, "I'm sorry, I'm not going to work with you. I'm not going to work with you." If they love food, we make an agreement that they give up one thing. So their part of the job is conscious. They give up one thing this month. One thing that they love. Is it bread? Is it cookies? What is it? One thing. Pasta, whatever. And then next month it's one more thing. So what we're doing is slowly shrinking the stomach. That way nature takes its course and they eat less. With hypnosis, they start choosing healthier food. Doesn't mean you can't eat food you like. It just means you eat appropriately.
So tell me more about what your work is entailing these days. Are you traveling and doing conferences? I know you've written your book, so tell us a little bit more about those things.
Conferences, I haven't been to any this last year, but, I'm around. I'm happy. Have teaching books will travel. I taught in Ireland 2 years ago, which was lovely. In the States, of course, always. Yeah.
Well, tell us about, so if people want to buy your book or book a session with you, can you give us some websites and such?
Thank you. Yeah, they can buy the book through Amazon.com, both Return Again and the Third Circle Protocol. Can I show the cover?
Yeah, please.
This is the one on relationships. It's called the Third Circle Protocol. So that's you, me, and the third circle, which is the relationship. And the one on past lives and interlife, something I want to tell you about it, is called Return Again. Now, this, I think, is the only book on past lives or interlives that I've discovered that has the integration process in it. The integration process says to you, okay, you've done a past life or 2 or 10, you've had an interlife, and you feel you know it. You've found your soul, you understand your purpose. Be very careful that you don't become a born again. Be very careful that you don't become like a smoker who's quit and you start bragging about you really should not be doing that sort of thing. Don't become one of those people. And there's a chapter in here, how to integrate the learning into your life without, I don't know how else to say it, without pissing everybody else off. Right? So live it rather than talk about it. That's in this book. People can reach me through a session, for a session on the website, which is georginacannon.com. I also have Skype clients, both for coaching, counselling. I don't do past lives on Skype because Skype can go down. And I'd hate for them to be, in a situation like being burned at the stake and they disappear. That wouldn't be good. So, but I'll do everything else on Skype.
Now, do you believe it's possible, if somebody was determined enough to work with you to do so, to clear all of the karma and blocks and even ancestral issues?
We do.
Yeah?
We do. Absolutely, we do. And I've had clients say to me, in fact, if you read some of the comments, I've had clients say to me, I feel like I've emerged like a new skin. I feel like, or someone will say, I feel like I've dropped off a heavy cloak. I feel like I know who I am and why I'm here. And God, it's so much easier,
So so in general, when somebody achieves that state, they just feel more free.
More free, more comfortable, just more comfortable. They're not running just to stand still. They're not wearing themselves out. They're not fighting. They're in rhythm. They're in harmony. It's just so much easier just to breathe, and to be.
Well, it's been a real pleasure having you on the show with me today. Thank you so much for taking the time, and I'm sure we'll eventually get you out here in Detroit. So looking forward.
I love that. I really would love that. Yeah, that'd be great. It'd be really cool. Thank you so much. Thank you. This has been a pleasure. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Awaken Empowered TV with my special guest, Georgina Cannon. Join me next week as we speak with another incredible individual who's standing on the leading edge and changing the world.